So now Dr. Kanchan will speak a little bit about the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, which is an extremely important subject, because not only you should understand the implications of understanding the curve, it's also important for you to understand its applications in clinical practice. All right. Annapurna, meanwhile, just ensure that the some of the respiratory therapists are there, and also who is not, where is Niharika? Niharika को भी बोलो जरा online आने के लिए. I don't know, she may be sleeping or something, but उसको भी बुलाओ जरा. ठीक है?
She must on the way, sir. She just left from the hospital just 10-15 minutes back.
Okay. So Kanchan, I'm going to share your screen, and you can start from now. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Can everybody see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
All right. So let's start, Kanchan. Let me hear you.
So how will I just, how will I make the next slide appear? Hello.
Kanchan, I will go ahead for you. Don't worry. Just say next slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
So today's topic is oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. So first of all, when we inhale the air, the 21% oxygen is there. So it goes from the nasopharynx, then the larynx, then trachea, bronchi, primary bronchus, secondary bronchus, tertiary bronchus. Then it goes into the lower respiratory tract through the bronchiole, terminal bronchiole, and at the alveolar sac level, there are a bunch of alveoli. So where the oxygen carbon dioxide gaseous exchange takes place. So when at the capillary membrane, there is a venous blood which comes in contact with the high amount of oxygen in the alveolus. The major part is the hemoglobin, which is there on the RBC, which does this, which is a major component to transport the oxygen. So hemoglobin is an iron-containing oxygen transport metalloprotein in the red blood cells. The hemoglobin molecule is an assembly of 4 globular protein subunits, 2 alpha subunits and 2 beta subunits. Each subunit is composed of a protein chain tightly associated with a non-protein prosthetic group at the center, which is a heme group. So heme group consists of an ion, which is held in the center, heterocyclic ring, which is known as a porphyrin ring. So there is an ion at the center of this porphyrin ring, which together is the heme group. So this porphyrin ring consists of 4 pyrrole molecules cyclically linked together by methane bridges with the ion bound at the center. So hemoglobin molecule can bind up to 4 oxygen molecules in a reversible method. So hemoglobin exists in 2 forms: a tau, that is a tense form, which is a non-oxygen loving form, and a relaxed form, which is R form, which is oxygen loving form. The binding of third slide.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
So next, yes. So the hemoglobin exists. So uske pehle wala. So the hemoglobin exists in 2 forms: a tense form, that is a T form, and a relaxed form, which is a R form. The binding of oxygen to the ion, there is a T form available because it's a venous blood, and there is a binding of oxygen with the T form. Initially, it is with the difficulty in binding, which causes binding causes the breakage of the salt bridges in the hemoglobin structure, which causes a conformational change in its structure, and which encourages the next molecule of oxygen to bind in the next group of globin chain. So this favors the another oxygen, which is a third oxygen remaining bind to the heme unit within the hemoglobin. So thus this oxygen binding is a cooperative binding. That is, the initial oxygen binding favors the oxygen binding to remaining heme groups, and thus how the hemoglobin gets saturated with 4 molecules of hemoglobin. So when the oxygen concentration levels are high, as in the lungs, the R state is favored, enabling the maximum amount of oxygen to be bound to the heme. In the capillaries at the tissue level, where the oxygen concentration levels are lower, the T state is favored in order to facilitate the delivery of oxygen to the tissues. The shape of the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve results from the interaction of bound oxygen molecules with incoming molecules. The binding of the first molecule is difficult. However, this facilitates the binding of the second, third, and fourth. This is due to the induced conformational change in the structure of the hemoglobin molecule induced by the binding of the first oxygen molecule. 1 gram of hemoglobin carries around 1.34 ml of oxygen can be transported, and oxygen dissolved in the plasma is around 0.3 ml per 100 ml of blood. So out of the total hemoglobin, there is 97% is hemoglobin bound. Out of the total oxygen, 97% is hemoglobin bound, and 3% is dissolved in plasma. So there is a relationship between the. So next slide. There is a relationship between the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood and the saturation of hemoglobin molecule. So the dissolved form is responsible for the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood. So this is an oxygen hemoglobin curve where on the y-axis there is a partial pressure of oxygen in the blood, and on the x-axis there is a percent saturation of the hemoglobin. As the this oxyhemoglobin curve, it describes the relationship between the partial pressure of oxygen and the oxygen saturation. So hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen increases as the successive molecules of oxygen bind. So more molecules bind as the oxygen partial pressure increases. So as the partial pressure of oxygen increases, the more molecules of oxygen bind to hemoglobin until the maximum amount that can be bound is reached. As this limit is approached, a very little additional binding occurs and the curve levels out at the hemoglobin as the hemoglobin becomes saturated with oxygen. Hence the curve has a sigmoid or S shape. So at the pressure above 60 millimeters of mercury, the standard dissociation curve is relatively flat. So there is not much change in the oxygen saturation of the hemoglobin, which means that the oxygen content of the blood does not change significantly even with the large increases in the oxygen partial pressure. So in the next table, it shows that whenever the arterial PaO2 is around 80, HB hemoglobin saturation is around 94%. When PaO2 is 60, it is around 90%. Then when it is 50, it is around 80%. And at 40, it is around 70%. The partial pressure of oxygen, the next slide. The partial pressure of oxygen in the blood at which the hemoglobin is 50% saturated typically is about 26.6 millimeters of mercury for a healthy person, and that is known as P50. The P50 is a conventional measure of hemoglobin affinity for oxygen. In the presence of disease or other conditions that change the hemoglobin oxygen affinity and consequently shift the curve to the right or left, the P50 changes accordingly. An increased P50 indicates a rightward shift of the standard curve, which means that a larger partial pressure of oxygen is required to maintain a 50% oxygen saturation. This indicates a decreased affinity. Conversely, a lower P50 indicates a leftward shift and a higher affinity. So this is a rightward shift of the curve. Rightward shift means the release of oxygen which happens at the tissue level. The causes of rightward shift are when do you want the release of oxygen at tissue level? The number one cause is hypoxia. There is lower oxygen available at the tissue level. So so the RBC tries to unload the oxygen. So whenever there is a rightward shift, there is an unloading of oxygen from the RBCs. Whenever there is hypoxia, there is a accumulation of the carbon dioxide, and due to which there is acidosis also. So these two also reasons for the unloading of the oxygen. During hypoxia, there is an increased levels of increased amount of glycolysis, so increased 2,3 DPG. So that is also a reason of unloading of oxygen for more cellular respiration. Then at high altitudes where there are low pressures, there is more requirement of oxygen at the tissue level. During exercise and during high temperature, there is a rightward shift of oxygen. Oxygen hemoglobin curve. Then hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the leftward shift, there are the causes are exactly opposite for the those mentioned for the rightward shift. Whenever there is an increase in pH, there is alkalosis, there is a hypocapnia. When there is a fetal hemoglobin, which has a more affinity for oxygen, there is a leftward shift. In a stored blood, there is a decreased 2,3 DPG levels because decreased glycolysis. So there is a leftward shift. That the leftward shift indicates that the loading of the oxygen, which happens at the lung level. So Bohr's effect and Halden effect. Bohr's effect increases the efficiency of oxygen transportation through the blood. So after hemoglobin binds to the oxygen in the lungs due to high oxygen concentration, the Bohr effects facilitates its release in the tissues, particularly those tissues in most need of oxygen. When a tissue's metabolic rate increases, its carbon dioxide waste production increases. This released carbon dioxide, it bonds with the water to form the bicarbonate, which dissociates into hydrogen ion HCO3 ion in the RBC. That's how the RBC gets protonated. So this causes the pH of the blood to decrease, which promotes the dissociation of the oxygen from the hemoglobin and allows the surrounding tissues to obtain enough oxygen to meet their demands. So there is a right shift, there is an unloading of oxygen which happens at the tissue levels, which is Bohr's effect. In areas where the oxygen concentration is high, particularly at the lung level, binding of oxygen causes the hemoglobin to release protons, that is H+ ions, which recombine with bicarbonate to eliminate carbon dioxide during exhalation. So these opposing protonation and deprotonation reactions occur in equilibrium, resulting in little overall change in the blood pH. So loading of oxygen at the lung level, which is a Halden effect, which is a left shift. Hypoxemia is decrease in arterial PO2. Hypoxemia usually doesn't raise a red flag until the arterial PO2 falls below 60 millimeters of mercury. And hypercapnia is defined as an arterial PO2 above 46 millimeters of mercury. That doesn't represent compensation for the metabolic alkalosis. Thank you. So that's it. Hello?
Yeah, it's not going in. That's it.
Yeah, that's it, sir.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, it was the present. Hold on. Okay. So the presentation was extremely good. Actually, there's a lot of material on the slide. So, few tips are, whenever you make a PowerPoint, we shouldn't have too much of material on the slide, because if there is too much of material on the slide, you will end up reading it, which you are doing. You understand what I'm telling you, Kanchan?
Yes, sir.
So if you have less material on the slide, then it makes a lot of sense. All right. So you should not have too much of material on the slide in the first place. Less material and more talking. That's what we normally want. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit of capnography. Now we all do EtCO2 monitoring, right? So the most easiest and the most confirmatory test that the endotracheal tube is in place is capnography. There is no other way you can detect that the endotracheal tube is in place. Auscultation, looking at the chest rise, looking at the hand going up and down, then you keeping your hand and feeling vapor on the tube. All these are not confirmatory. None of them are confirmatory. The only confirmatory sign for an endotracheal intubation is the seeing a graph on the EtCO2 monitor called as capnographic graph. Am I clear on this? It is only the capnographic graph that is very, very important, that has to be seen. So that is why, without doubt, it is the standard of care if you were to use if you were to keep a patient on mechanical ventilation. So irrespective of how stable the patient is, all patients on mechanical ventilation have to have a EtCO2 on. Clear on this? Every patient who's on mechanical ventilation should have a EtCO2 trace on, because that is standard of care. So tomorrow, if you have a patient on mechanical ventilation and you don't have your EtCO2 on, and God forbid this patient extubates and dies, or something like that occurs, then you can be caught in a court of law by asking, why didn't you do the standard of care? So standard of care is EtCO2. Without EtCO2, you cannot ventilate a patient, you cannot intubate a patient. Normally, when we intubate our patients, we have to assume very quickly, especially in critical care, that the tube is in place, and the only method to find out that is capnography. Now, EtCO2 has got two it can be found. When we say EtCO2, what is the full form of EtCO2? Can somebody tell me? Prasad, can you tell me the full form of EtCO2?
It's in tidal carbon dioxide concentration, sir.
Yeah. So
It's in
good. So when we as Prasad lightly has said, this is N tidal carbon dioxide value. So capnometry and capnography are two different things. Capnography is when you see a graph. Capnometry is when you see a value of EtCO2. Okay. So there are two kinds of EtCO2. Two methods to do EtCO2, that is gas sampling. One is called as a side stream method. Side stream method is what you see in the GE machine. What happens in the GE machine? There is a small thin tubing that starts from the endotracheal tube and goes to the machine. That takes the gas and measures the EtCO2. That takes the gas and measures it. This is called side stream capnography. Whereas mainstream capnography is when you attach the small connection directly onto the endotracheal tube. That is what we do for the Draeger machines. For the Draeger machines, you attach this small thing directly onto the endotracheal tube, the small black thing onto the endotracheal tube. That is called as capno. That is called as mainstream capnography. Clear on this? So mainstream, there are two types of methods of getting carbon dioxide. One is mainstream capnography. That means a small device is placed on the endotracheal tube and that directly finds the carbon dioxide, gives you a graph and gives you a value. That is mainstream capnography. Side stream capnography is a small tubing is attached to the endotracheal tube connections, and from there that tubing goes onto your ventilator and that takes the gas and then measures the carbon dioxide. That is called as side stream capnography. Clear on this? So what you see on the GE ventilator, the big ventilator which has got indirect calorimetry and all, that is the side stream capnography. Whereas what you're seeing on the Draeger ventilators with these small small cuvettes that you attach over there, that is called as mainstream capnography. All right. Is everyone clear? Is everyone clear? Everyone clear? Put your hands up if everyone's clear till now. All right. Okay. Now, Rohit, if I were to ask you, what are the, what is your value? Why would you use capnography in the intensive care? On what all you can get from capnography in the intensive care? Can you enumerate for everybody in words or in probably in sentences as to what you would like to see from the capnograph, from the EtCO2, apart from intubation?
Apart from intubation, I will like to see whether the graph is proper or not, the alpha angle, beta angle is proper or not. The waveform is good for the to know whether the cardiac output is good, patient is having spasm.
Right. So Rohit has explained many things that comes together with capnography, many things. Okay. So let us see one by one what all we can see with capnography. All right. So with capnography, the first thing you can figure out is, as we rightly first put it, the most important thing is the tube is in the endotracheal. The tube is in the endotracheal region. So apart from intubation, what all can we see? So there is a graph. So you have a graph from the capnography that you see. That graph has got some angles. It has got an angle, but it is a graph. You've seen the graph on the screen, right? You've seen a graph that looks like a square. Okay, it's got 4 phases. The first phase is when it comes from the top to down. That is the inspiration. Clear on this? Top to down, not down to top. Okay, now we'll have to one by one see the phases of that. When inspiration starts, there is a flat form, a straight line. That is phase 1. On the baseline, when it reaches 0, what I'll do is, let's discuss this with a screenshot. So just give me a minute. Let me just open up a screenshot for you. Okay. Just hold.